discussion on gender and AI featuring the Women4Ethics of AI Platform. We have two moderators. One is, of course, Mrs. Gabriela Ramos, Assistant Director General for Social and Human Sciences at UNESCO, and Mrs. Alessandra Sala, Senior Director of AI and Data Science at Shutterstock and co-chair of UNESCO's Women4Ethics AI Platform. And the opening remarks will be made by Dr. Emilia Stojminova-Duh, Minister for Digital Transformation in the government of the Republic of Slovenia. You will do it sitting or you will come here? It's a free country, you can choose.
I want to be equal, I will do it sitting.
This is great. So opening remarks by Minister Stojminova-Duh.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for inviting me to be part of this panel. So I could not imagine a conference like this one without having a panel like this one. Why? Not because I believe that women are more than men, but because I believe women are equal to men. At this panel, you will see a lot of women. It is a huge panel where we have excellent ladies that are doing an amazing job in the field of artificial intelligence. I have to share with you, yesterday we had a special dedicated event, Women Leaders, where there are again many women, where we are all working in this topic. We are having a lot of success, but then during the dinner, we had a dinner with the leaders, and there were not so many women there. It was just a few. So the message here is not, we do have women that are working in artificial intelligence, especially when we are speaking in ethics in artificial intelligence, but we don't have so many leaders in artificial intelligence. And most of the times the decisions are made by the leaders. This is also why we need more leaders, because they are the policymakers. And we were discussing before, when we do take the leadership positions, we must not forget about gender equality. We must keep fighting for gender equality. We must not forget about the other women. We must bring other women on the top as well. So I'm very happy that we are having all these amazing ladies. I'm happy that we do have leaders like Gabriela, like many of you are here, and I would like to have even more. Artificial intelligence and having not only women, but of course different races, there are other genders as well, so it's not only male and female. Different genders having on board, different generations having on board, because this is a technology that impacts all of us. It's not impacting one gender only. And we need to consider this not only when we are preparing the algorithms, not only when we are preparing the models, but also when we are collecting the data. Because if the data is collected from men only, then I'm so sorry we cannot speak about inclusive AI, because we are forgetting a huge amount of population there. And another thing, this panel, it's not female panel. This panel is for everyone, because women on our own, we can, of course, we can support ourselves, we are strong, but we do need men who understand how important it is that we have both men and women together, working together, including each other, because at the end of the day, the solutions that will be provided will be better for all of us. I don't want to take more, because we have excellent panelists here, and I would like to hear more from you. Thanks again for having me here.
Amazing. Yes, it deserves a big round of applause. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today in this panel. It means so much to us, for hosting us in the beautiful Slovenia. So let me just spend a few words on what do we want to address in this panel. So we stand before you and the distinguished delegates and you, ladies and gentlemen, listening to us online, inspired by a monumental shift in the corporate landscape. Just a few days ago, Apple has announced that they have reached gender equality in their board of directors. In 2021, when we launched the recommendation on the ethics of AI, we had a gender chapter. Article 89 was speaking about gender representation and equal between men and women in the board, in the leadership. So this marks an historical moment. After 4 years, we have reached what we hope in one company. So a moment that demands celebration. So reflecting on the past, we acknowledge the stride that we have made in the pursuit of gender equality. But yet the road ahead remains challenges as disparity remains big and diverse across the globe. So according to the World Economic Forum, the gender report in 2023, it's clear that we have made very little progress from last year, 2022, only 3%. Only 0.3%. So at the current rate, the report is telling us that it will take other 131 years. And we know we have committed to the SDG. In 6 years, we want to close the gender gap, so we need to do something different. The UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI, which was launched and approved by 193 member states in 2021, is the first and only adopted document that has an explicit chapter on gender. So gender equality remains a challenge in the world, but is even bigger in the realm of AI. And the progress that we have made in society so far are threatened by an inherent bias that we have in those models. And so we risk to retrogress. And that's the key. We risk to retrogress. I want to show you with a very practical example what I mean by we risk to retrogress. There is a very interesting study, an independent study for Bloomberg, that is quantifying the magnitude of generative AI. So they studied thousands of images generated by generative AI model. And they have prompted this model to generate with job title and crimes. What happened is that each image that is perceive a woman, the model generates almost 3 times more images that are perceived of perceived men. Most occupations in the data set are dominated by men. And when I say men, I really mean white men. But let me leave it with you with a very concrete example. And I want to use a data from US because we are so proud that US is back at UNESCO. So when the model was prompted with the keyword judge, 3% of the images were representing women judges. In US only, 34 of US judges are women, according to the National Association of Women Judges. Thus, the model has forgotten 31% of the progress that we have made to date. And that's what I mean. Those models are retrogressing us compared to the progress that we have made so far, because they are the representation of the worst of the society that we have built, instead of striving towards the SDG goal. Where do we want to go? So during this session, we'll focus on addressing the specific measure related to gender. We will explore the collective responsibility we share in driving tangible changes, ranging from education to policies for institutions and corporations. And to get started, I really want to pass the Microsoft and acknowledge the woman ADG Gabriela Ramos, who is spearheading the ethical revolution and serving as a driving force behind the advancement of gender equality in the field of AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and great to have Ale co-chairing. We said co-chairing, but you are the chair. You are the real chair. You're the force behind this fantastic network. And Minister, your presence really, really honors the efforts that we're trying to do here. But I have to say that as we launch the AI Experts Without Borders outside, in the public I see many female leaders, like Angelica and Emma, and so many, Merve, and but we don't have the space here. But in any case, we know that you are also moving this fight. Recognize Emma Ruth-Camblom and also Constanza Gomez-Mont, because when we were, when they were the ones drafting the recommendation, and I arrived as a new ADG, and I said, where is the gender chapter? And many of your members of your group, they said, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Because if we talk about discrimination, we talk about discrimination about everybody, and gender is included there. We said, no way. We need a gender chapter dedicated. And it was not easy. And I have to say that it was not easy, not because of the usual suspects that are there to block. It was very well-behaved men that were in the group that said, no, we don't need that, thank you. So Constance and I drafted something, you improved it massively, and then our wonderful chair, Emma, said, yes, we need that chapter, so because I'm the chair, I'm keeping it, it's fine. So that's how we made it, so thank you so much for that. Impressive. We always need, as the minister said, we always need women that are not only dedicated for gender equality, because all the females that you see here are doing many other things, and in charge of enterprises, in charge of institutions, and in charge of a ministry, but they have core to their task to continue pushing for gender equality. So let me start exactly with Constanza with the first question. You are a founder of Principal Sea Minds and founder also for AI for Climate. And I want to ask you, Constanza, you have been very involved in this topic, as I said, having led the gender chapter of the recommendation as part of the high-level drafting committee, and also through the work that you do in Sea Minds. And could you provide us with your thoughts about the benefits of implementing gender strategies and provide some examples for practical implementation, please?
For sure. And I remember those beautiful sleepless nights where we were working together and not only having the first gender chapter in one of these key documents that are standard setting, but also what would this mean with a global consultation? How can we enrich this with a diversity of perspectives? Because when we say children, you know, and women and girls, it's not one box. We have to also recognize a great diversity that is when we talk about this agenda. There's a huge list of benefits for this gender inclusion, but I want to highlight three. The first, it is completely proven, actually Boston Consulting Group just had a report that they studied 1,700 companies all around different regions, and it is proven that diverse and gender inclusive teams bring greater creativity and innovation to process decision making. And this doesn't only mean more effective solutions, it also, if we want to talk in economic terms, it brings financial returns that are targeted because of this innovative teams. So that is undoubtedly one of the reasons that should be backing up the companies and the industry to be backing up policies within the governance structure to have more inclusive groups. But also, let's not talk only about economic terms. Let's talk about the era we're living. We're living in an era where we're talking about huge challenges in healthcare, huge challenges in poverty, huge challenges in climate change, biodiversity. And what we need right now is exactly creativity and innovation to think about outside the box to be able to solve this. And we won't have that if there is no diversity and inclusive gender groups that are taking decisions for these agendas. You know, the quote that Einstein said that you cannot solve a problem with the same mindset that created the problem. Well, for me, the same mindset is all male groups that are leading these discussions. Now, we're seeing every day more and more diversity and more creativity and innovation in these fields. The second is a topic of fairness. We cannot talk about the fairness in the implementation of AI systems and their use if we're not talking about diversity and gender inclusion. This doesn't mean only having products that are centered in the needs of users. When we're talking about a population that's more than 50% of users, if you don't include a women perspective in the product, process, or service, then your product is completely inefficient. So we can talk about that in a very simplistic economic and productivity terms. Rather, I also want to talk about it on the value of fairness and the principle of fairness that drives us forward as a community and an international group that is pushing for this. And thirdly, I want to talk about all of these bring greater economic growth to companies, and not only to companies, to structures. We're talking about countries that need to be more resilient with these huge digital transformations. Well, let's push for this resiliency, having more gender inclusion, having a greater strategy for this that makes not only products more effective and user-centric, but also more fair and centered in the needs of a population that is more than 50% of our world. And you asked, Gabriela, what to do. What can you do if you're in the government, if you're in the industry, if you're civil society? I like to think about this in a framework that allows me to act upon it. I like to think about this, and we saw it with the recommendation we worked on. We have the AI life cycle. So when we talk about gender inclusion and the AI life cycle, we're talking about representation in data. We're talking about having more women coding. We're talking about having more women in the decision-making of these AI structures. We're talking about what type of hypotheses are guiding these AI systems and having women helping hypothesize and being in the backbone of this decision-making. So we can talk about very specific ways to make this more gender inclusive if we're talking about the AI life cycle of its development and use. However, there's another structure that is as important when we're talking about the systemic approach to gender inclusion. And we're talking about the AI ecosystem behind this. I'd like to emphasize 5 very specific actions, and you can read more about this in the diverse resources UNESCO is spearheading on this. First, as Gabriela said, let's make visible this invisible sometimes agenda. That doesn't mean diluting these gender sections or policies or targeted actions in the chapter of data, in the chapter of bias, in the chapter of inclusion. Let's talk about the invisibility of this agenda in these policies. Let's have a special place where targeted actions can be specified, where accountability measures can be included, and where transparency mechanisms can also be embedded in the policies that are set. Second, the funding. We cannot have a strategy if there's no funding and backing up of this. We're talking not only about specific things such as scholarship, but also, for example, the government being supplying more procurement processes that are demanding that the companies that supply the government, for example, have gender balance in their agendas. This from a long list, and we're all happy to be able to talk more about this in the breaks and with our group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Constanza, with that passion, but also with the content, because that's exactly what you put in the chapter that then got approved by member states, financing, presence, and representation, and of course, the funding, which is great. And that brings us to our dear Elena Estavillo, who is the Director General, Centro E, and former commissioner, Mexican Federal Telecommunications Institute, and you were one of those that really started building a stronger institution in the telecom that is still there, surviving, which is great. And I want to ask you, following these comments by Constanza, how can we collectively support the development of public policy in this field? And which are the levers to accelerate the realization of effective regulatory frameworks?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for being here. It's so nice to be in this place with all of you. I believe that we need both regulation and public policy to change economic incentives and trigger just what Constanza said, systemic change. We need systemic change. We already have strong economic incentives for developing commercial AI. And to guide it, it's that we need ethical principles that should be embedded in regulation. But we also need to put in place an incentive framework to produce public interest AI, to channel public and private resources to AI that has a high impact on equality. That is, that systems that help to bridge divides, and not only that they don't discriminate, they actively help to bridge these inequalities. And to infuse gender perspective in the whole of AI cycle. Public policy needs to work for systemic change. And because gender gaps are the materialization of systemic and historical discrimination. We need to work not only on these effects, the gaps are the effects, but to move from symptoms to causes. And we need to focus on factors that produce and sustain gender gaps, because this is the only way to achieve permanent and self-sustainable change. And to have a systemic approach means fixing systems against fixing women. For example, promoting women to STEM careers is very important, but we also need not to discourage girls that show interest and talent in the first place. To have an inclusive discourse so that these girls are exposed, and little boys also, that they see women as protagonists in every field of activity. To fight against wage gap, against toxic culture, the work cultures, and digital violence, or to study, for example, why many women engineers leave their professions and leave the tech sector. We have to look at these factors and work on it also. Systemic change means that women participate actively in decision-making, in policy design, in enforcement, and on resources allocation. That is, to participate in deciding how resources are used, and also on the other side of receiving those resources for design, for deployment, for research, for evaluation. And that women's perspectives are present when these decisions are made, and on which AI is built, for which purposes and needs, and how it is used. Inclusion and gender perspective in deciding which AI is built and deployed has to do with priorities, to necessities, to risks, and to a balance of risks and benefits, considering which groups bears the risks and which receive the benefits. Also, we need policies and resources to assure that training data reflect women's needs, perspectives, and preferences. Governments have many important levers, and it is important that they use them all. Of course, legislation and regulation, but also public spending. And governments can adopt ethical procurement and ethical use, and this is very powerful also to produce change. Public policy, to change economic incentives so that private developments respond not only to commercial incentives, but also to ethical principles. And to create these incentives that we need and the mechanisms to produce public interest and gender-aware AI. Women representation and participation in digital technological authorities is essential, and gender perspective in decision-making. And gender perspective is also very, very important. Not only women participation, but that men, women, different genders have this conscious of gender when they make decisions, when they analyze, when they use technologies. Thank you.
What is amazing, Elena, of what you have just said is that you can take out the gender equation, and what you are aiming at is inclusive societies, non-discriminatory societies, societies that have the reflection of who is represented, who is not represented, not take it for granted how these things work. And this is something that we always say, Ali. We always say that gender lenses and gender-based policies will help us to have more inclusive societies, period. So it's good for women, but it's also good for societies, because it brings this ethical reflection. You were doing an amazing ethical reflection, and that's a point to think ex ante, what the outcome would be for women. But then if you think for women, you're thinking about humanity. So that's fantastic. I really like it. Let me go with Emma Wright, who is the Director and Counsel of Interparliamentary Forum of Emerging Technologies. We've heard Elena, who was talking about policies and how to frame the issues. I want you to take the step forward on legislation and practical toolkits that will help to deliver ethical AI and, of course, gender-friendly AI. Which are the toolkits and the frameworks available today, and what do you think is still to be developed?
Thank you, and thank you to the Minister for hosting us in such an important debate, and to Gabriela for bringing us together again. I mean, I've been working on AI and what our Interparliamentary Forum does, and what our objective was to bring legislators together to discuss best practice in AI in 2017, 2018. Myself and a member of Parliament in the UK who established it, we were told it was too niche. It's just a bit too niche all of a sudden. And the game changer was the UNESCO recommendation on AI and ethics, because it showed that 193 countries could agree on some of the basic principles that we wanted to go forward when we adopt AI. And I think that was a real turning point. And then we have generative AI. But I think 5 years ago, governments were talking about an industrial strategy. Now we are suddenly hearing from the USA, from China, from the EU about effective governance and what that looks like. The only thing I would say is that people are talking about a human-centered approach. My fear is, without this gender lens, the H and the U is dropped. We should be looking at a people-centered approach, because actually the majority often wins out, and although we aren't the minority, actually in the data sets we're not accurately represented. We're not accurately represented in kind of what's been developed. So governments are building the capabilities, but our focus with our legislators are we keep getting feedback that they want practical examples, and the RAM tools and what UNESCO have developed are fine examples of this, along with the NIST framework. But I think what we also have to do is start kind of congregating around these examples so that we can make the same assessments together. There needs to be the country overlay, but the gender lens is absolutely critical. And I think the other issue that we also have is that there is an expertise missing in the public sector, unfortunately, to be able to challenge this development of these tools. I'll give you an example. So in the UK, we have obviously done our AI Safety Institute focusing on frontier models, which we support this idea that there is greater international collaboration, absolutely. But in the UK last week, the Treasury introduced a change in tax. It meant that 70% of females are now removed from being able to angel invest. 3% of venture capital money in the UK goes into female-founded companies. And for us to be able to have diverse tech with gender lens, we need the pipeline to come through. We need the girls to be trained, but we also need companies that are female-founded, because this is where we get innovation, that the wonderful women have already talked about. And I think this is a really critical point when countries are looking at their AI landscape, that they are looking at the entire the process, from education to funding to actually the output, and the decision makers looking at the output. I think the other thing just to keep in mind, and is a critical point with legislators, is that actually if something goes wrong, it's going to be the legislators that will be the ones that are answerable. If something, a bit like genetically modified food, or we are trying, that these toolkits are so important, because actually what we don't want to do, we're all in agreement that the opportunities are tremendous with AI, providing they are inclusive and ethical for all. They have this people-centered approach. But equally, if something does go wrong, what we risk is something happening that stops the development, that actually, that it may be a piece of AI that is more inclusive, but it has an output. And that's why, as the Interparliamentary Forum, what we are trying to do is highlight the toolkits, but also educate the legislators so that there is already an understanding both in government and opposition. I'm from the UK, who we seem to be able to change ministers all kinds of times at the moment. But, you know, we are anticipating that, because actually when we take this forth from this forum and share our experiences with people that don't consider themselves technologists, that is how we are going to bring this gender lens and this gender perspective. Thank you.
Amazing. It's always beautiful to listen to Emma, because she brings those very practical examples that really help us to realize what's the next step ahead. And because we want to always be concrete and inclusive, let's go a little bit to hear from someone, our expert, on what's happening in Africa from the global south. So I want to move and get to Emma, our beautiful Emma, professor and head of the Department of Philosophy, Faculty of Humanities at University of Pretoria, chair of the UNESCO World Commission on the Ethics of Scientific Knowledge and Technology, and a member of the UN Secretary General Advisory Body on AI. So, dear Emma, what's the progress that you have been witnessing and driving around the global AI debate in Africa? And how is it integrating the gender aspect? What are the obstacles that you are seeing in the gender discrimination in Africa? And can you provide some practical example on how we can engage in this global discussion around the gender issue?
Thank you very much. First, it is very important to make the point that a lot is going on in Africa, in AI and in AI ethics, and from the side of women. But for women from that continent to be visible in the global context takes a lot, and takes a different kind of effort, perhaps, than it takes if one comes from the global north. So there is this wonderful movement called RAIN Africa, Responsible AI Africa, which does not belong to women only. There are many men in that group, but there are also many women in that group. And it was one of the first networks that I came across where I met other women working in AI ethics. But of course, Africa's exclusion, let's say in the past, because UNESCO is doing so much to stop that, but Africa's exclusion from the AI table in the past has made women twice invisible on that continent. And I must say, this is one of the most unexpected outcomes of the RAM. I still think the RAM is one of the most magical instruments that UNESCO has come up with, and they have many. Because working on the RAM also amplifies and makes clear where there is a need to zoom in on gender issues, and in what way, and how to bring that into policy, into AI strategies in Africa. Because the women who worked on the RAM in the 18 countries in Africa that are at various stages of implementing the RAM, that was also given them a voice that they would not otherwise have had. And the reason for that is, if I just want to highlight a few of practical obstacles, and this is, of course, hugely generalized. Africa is not, it's a continent with a lot of diversity and different situations in different African states, obviously. But there are certain things that unite us, certain obstacles that unite us. It is still the case that in many areas, women are viewed to belong to the home or to belong on the fields, and that even it might bring dishonor to a family if a woman goes out to work, because it implies that the man cannot take care of the woman. So we have to understand these kinds of constraints. And then a really, really important issue, and especially I'm from South Africa, and in South Africa this is a real threat to women, is gender-based violence. In South Africa, a woman is raped every 36 seconds. So in the time that it took me to start talking, and my clock is not ticking, which is fantastic, quite imagine, I mean, just take a minute, and in that minute, 2 women would have been raped. And then there is the value that is given to female work in the workplace, the way in which the work setting is set up. It is set up in a particular way because it was set up not in an inclusive way. Given all of this, women are less likely to access STEM and ICT disciplines. Women are less likely to be employed in the formal sector. Women are less likely to influence government policies. Women are less likely to design digital spaces. And that is the vicious circle, because then there isn't, when we talk of data poverty, we think of regional exclusion, and we think of the global south being left behind. But all of what we say obviously also counts when we think in terms of women. If digital spaces belong to men because they are designed to men, women find themselves not comfortable in those spaces. And if you don't see other women moving in those spaces, immediately the message is, this is not for you. And that is why this group is so very important. That is why we have to go out into the world, all of us. That is why we have to say, it can be done. We want you. You can do this. You belong here. You have a right to create these spaces. So in South Africa, only 23% of tech jobs belong to women. And I can tell you that they fought for it. So there is a lot being done, however, and I want to give a few concrete examples. I have no idea how I am for time because my clock is not ticking, but I'll be fast anyway, out of respect for the others. There is a group called Women in Tech ZA in South Africa that profiles women, that simply tells stories. So every week there is a different woman in tech profiled on this blog, and they follow the stories of these women. So go and have a look. It's really, really very interesting. And they have a lot of outreach and awareness projects as well. There is the deep learning Indaba, the wonderful deep learning Indaba, which does not belong, obviously, only to women. But it does so much. It is an association to foster and support machine learning for Africans in Africa, for African problems. But they focus on gender issues, and they make it it's one of their focal points, as is AI ethics. Then there is the group Policy in Uganda. They are a group of feminists, technologists, data scientists, humanities, people who want to believe that they can show, and their role is to show how life in Uganda can improve for women through quality data. They have extremely interesting publications with wonderful names like Engendering AI, Bias and Future Imageries. I invite you to go and look at their website, Policy with the double L. Then in Kenya, there's Women in Machine Learning and Data Science, which is growing exponentially, which makes everyone very happy. And then there are people like Resetki Sefula in South Africa who uses satellite images and AI to analyze spatial apartheid. And she is doing exceptionally good work. She's also employed by DARE. Feminine Gebru's, my brain is not working now, her association. And then lastly, this is not really something that belongs only to women, but just to show how important AI is also. Because in South Africa, there are also many movements that have NGOs that have started to push the importance of using AI in rape cases. Because not only are a woman raped every 36 seconds, 98% of these cases are never solved. So there is a huge problem in South Africa specifically with that. But employing AI for video analysis, for DNA matching, can help us so much. So this technology is a technology that improves our lives, but it is also a technology that belongs to us, and that that's the message that we should send out so that we can become visible and we can inspire the women and girls in Africa. Thank you.
Loved. Yes, it deserves a big round of applause. Make women visible in Africa and everywhere else in the world, not just in some specific case when we don't want to be visible. And I want to continue around this line of making women visible. And I want to go to Sarah. Sarah is a research officer, Department of Education, University of Oxford. Sarah, can you talk to us around the role of the education to make women included, inspired to become part of this field and to educate more women? We know that AI is changing the role, the education system, and how do you see it shaping the future women that we are educating?
Thank you so much, Alessandra, and thank you, EDG Ramos and Minister, for hosting me in Slovenia, which has been amazing, and inviting me to join this panel with these very impressive Women for Ethical AI. It's a pleasure to be here, and in answer to your question, I do believe the pedagogical framework of education systems is challenged by AI, and personally, I'm really grateful for that. Because for me, education is at the beating heart of our society, and I can't envisage a transformation of this scale without education at the centre of the conversation. Many teachers will be familiar with the proverb that says, "Our work is to plant the trees whose shade we will never sit under." And I think by the nature of our endeavour as teachers, we're altruistic and future-focused in everything we do. We're constantly looking at what's next and how to best prepare our young people to thrive in the world. Sitting here in this forum over the last 2 days, we're facing the same challenge. Together, we're planting the seeds of governance and ethical use that will serve to shade and protect us in the future. And for me, that's really exciting. It's a challenge that holds great promise. And as we work together to ethically explore how AI can be used for tech, for good and for all, I'm reminded of a question that I used in my daily work as a school leader. When faced with a problem and exploring the potential solutions, I would ask myself, is this good for all the children? In terms of actionable and concrete outcomes from this forum, I'd invite you to take that question home with you. Take it to your policy-making tables. Are the policy decisions you're making or the new technologies that you're developing good for everyone? Is what you're building, implementing, sharing good for all the children? Are you representing all of them in your data and in your outputs? Are you reflecting their lived experience? Whilst at first this question may seem an oversimplification, if we can put this at the forefront of our minds when solving these big problems, I believe we will see decisions being made that benefit and better represent every member of our society, and therefore women will be better represented. In terms of what this means for participation for our children, it's very simple. Our children cannot be it if they cannot see it. As a teacher, I have taught amazing children from across the world. And when they come into my classroom, they come with all different languages and cultures and backgrounds and economic status and learning ability. But no matter where they come from or who they are, for that year, they're my children. And as technologists and governments and policymakers who are invested in AI for the future, I hope that sentiment is echoed in your work too. Are we all here working for every child? To do this, I think we have to start by addressing our own positions of privilege and bias. And I know that makes us uncomfortable, but it's necessary. At Oxford, I work in a team called the Learning for Families Through Technology, and I work with a group of 8 phenomenal women in this space. As part of that research group, I'm leading a research project on collaborative AI with men and women from 3 global tech and industry partners. The research that we're doing resides at the intersection of technology, policy, and literacy in 18 languages. As the arbiter of the quality of the AI output in this project, the first step I took when we launched the project was to recognize my own privilege and inherent bias as a researcher. I addressed this by adding to the cognitive and cultural diversity of the team. Answering the call to action were 2 fabulous women who recently joined, a specialist in the field from South Africa and another from Singapore. Instantly, our research team more closely reflected the geographic, linguistic, and cultural diversity that our research is seeking to impact. For me, this choice was critical, ensuring that the work we're doing is globally representative and aligned with the UNESCO ethical framework. It has formed the foundation of our project. In fact, the first deliverable of our project was to align our project map and goals to the ethical guidelines set out by UNESCO. Setting the guiding ethical principles that would steer our work was the first thing to do. It was a must-have, not a nice-to-have. In summary, as I bring my speech to an end, I have 3 key takeaways that I hope you'll take home with you. Firstly, let's work together to recognise our own privilege and bias, as uncomfortable as that may make us feel, and actively work to mitigate them in our endeavour. Secondly, of every decision, whether about the supply chain for trade or energy consumption, please ask yourself in the back of your mind, is this the right decision for every child? Then we know we'll be making critical decisions that represent the needs of everyone. And thirdly, if you have a look around your decision-making table and it doesn't reflect the same diversity as your local school playground, please pause and rethink the formation of your decision-making committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, we will reuse your 3 takeaways, so precise and effective, and I also see the minister that is taking note. We love them. Yes, we were looking at each other saying yes. Still on education, Professor Jana Javornik, I'd like to bring the similar question to you. The role of education in this transforming world with AI and how we support our students through those new technology and inspire more diverse participation in tech.
Dobar večer. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for organizing this in policy and business. I would say what gets actioned, what gets measured gets actioned, and I think in fora like this, what gets tabled matters. So I think opening and adding the issue of gender to the wider global conversation around AI really is incredibly important, especially because I think women have traditionally been undervalued and particularly silenced. And when it comes to the global conversation around artificial intelligence, I think women are silenced and removed from making comments on the artificial intelligence and being invited to the panels. We are very much confronted with manuals, with all due diligence, with apologies to everyone who's sitting in this in the audience tonight, which is quite remarkable to see so many men actually being attending this particular panel by women and for women. But just to answer your question, can I use this opportunity to actually widen and broaden up the conversation around gender? And particularly because I think it is a historic moment of being inclusive and talking about diversity. And some of the issues around diversity have already been covered, particularly around geopolitics and race and ethnicity. But there are also gender identity, sexual identity, and things like that. It's not gender, it's not just binary, it's not just women and men, and it's not just us and them. And I obviously don't want to be controversial, to kind of at the end of the forum, but I think these need to be open conversations around that. And just one point to add, also in terms of education, which is very often ignored or neglected, is that women aren't a homogenous group either. We are incredibly diverse amongst ourselves. And this morning what I did, and thank you for starting the questions with this, I actually asked Siri if Siri could find me pictures of university professors, and guess what? It's not just men, it's just kind of like older white men. And I was in for a surprise because I really wanted Siri to have improved. And so I asked Siri, are you gender biased? And the answer was, I don't have an answer. So this is basically what, kind of it goes to the point you made earlier. And the role of education here is incredibly important, particularly at higher education. We are very big in doing science and producing science and co-producing knowledge and transferring knowledge and sharing ideas. But I don't think we are actually critical enough of the role we actually have in making the societies better and more inclusive as is, particularly as we are very typical of what the artificial intelligence is portraying. We are fairly white. We are fairly kind of like at the top. The view is quite homogeneous. It's very male and pale. So in terms of the conversations we are having here, I think it's really, we need to be having conversations around justice and fairness. It's kind of moving the conversation to the next generation and moving away from equality towards equity, justice and fairness in artificial intelligence and beyond. And obviously artificial intelligence, which has been told today many, many times, does appear neutral, but it's really made by humans. And, this means that it does internalize all the same biases, including gender and all other biases. And I think societies today are really struggling to achieve gender equality and gender equity. And we've just seen this new shocking results from the survey that young men seem to be going backwards. So I think we really have an incredible historic opportunity, but also responsibility to reverse that trend. And on that note, thanks again for adding this topic to the forum.
Thank you, Jana, and I really loved your push towards extending our definition on gender being inclusive, and diversity is definitely at the core of the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI and why we are all here today. So thank you for making that note, and keep building on the role of education towards the future. Let's have a look at the future and understanding how AI is impacting the future of jobs and how those future jobs will impact women employment. So I want to go to Anna Prika now, Chief SDG Strategy Officer, Association of Women in Engineering, Science and Tech. Dear Anna, the adoption of automation tool and AI is transforming the job role at their core. How can we provide practical guidelines to ethically guide the redefinition of future jobs, those jobs that we will hope to be inclusive for all?
Okay. Well, Seneca said, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. I think that's a good starting point. In regards to how we're going to navigate the cloudy waters of digital age or the AI times, definitely we all need to use our ethical compass, multiple stakeholder solution approach, human capital empowerment, and human capital ethical management systems. But once again, what defines a job? The repetitive actions that are done at grade level, or the skills, the competencies associated, or the possibilities that is given to us in order to always upgrade ourselves. I think that a good review of the reduction in force methodology is needed in digital age because lots of good lessons are to be learned from research. It is said that today's layoffs have become companies' default response to the challenges created by technological advances and global competition. Therefore, demystifying tech or green tech, it's hard or easy depending on the eye of the beholder, same as everything else at the end of the day. But when women representation is below 20%, is training on the existing job while developing skills for something that is yet to be created, is that sufficient? Definitely, we need lots of agility in the transition. We need to be able to step out, step higher again, understanding the complexity and mastering lifelong learning. It's not easy, but something that needs to be learned, debated, understood, and developed as a process to improve livelihoods, because the statistics are really shivering. And predicting the exact number of jobs at the global level that either they're going to diminish or they will flourish due to AI, machine learning, automation in the next 5 to 6 years, it's incredibly difficult. And we have stats from 300 million to 845 millions, 14%, 2%. Well, regardless, the job revolution evolution has a great socio-economical impact. And our role is to ensure that it will be done in an ethical manner. Automation should not disable human intellect, but should enable skills and new knowledge ground. We need to handle with care or brace for the social, economical, environmental impact. I think that we need to use our optimistic lens, so we can say that another report said that back in 1940, 60% of today's jobs did not exist, right? So we can think that the influence of AI on employment dynamics, the domino effect of automation, delineates the delicate interplay between automation, machine learning, and a skilled workforce. Well, digital age, digital era, or cogitandi era, cogito ergo sum, very important in digital age, because I'm one that performed those actions across the globe, across continents, and I can tell you, the approach is different from rules to legislation, but the human suffering and impact remains the same. Obviously, we need to review our thinking patterns. We need to review and reframe, reimagine, redesign, engineer or re-engineer new skills and competencies. Agile work, it's something that's going to be crucial. Addressing the potential exacerbation of the socioeconomic divide due to AI involves an all-hands-on-deck approach. UNESCO definitely can help with the amazing library, repository of best practices, experience, recommendation for incentives of participation of girls, women, and underrepresented groups in all stages of the AI lifecycle system. I think that we need to develop comprehensive holistic educational frameworks that cater to diverse learning modalities, ensuring equitable access and nurturing a spectrum of skills, review where broadband is accessible and where it's not. We need to develop and implement universal digital proficiency. We need equitable access to AI education. We need social safety nets. And we need to acknowledge the potential for enhanced efficiency, understanding the consequential shifts in employment patterns. And this necessitates a lot of strategic interventions from all stakeholders in order to be inclusive and to have an ethical adaptation to our future. Humanity 5.0, I like this today. It's our biggest challenge. Leaving no one behind, definitely it's going to be difficult. But we are here to say that each one will build one and support each other. And that's our mission. Thank you.
So we are converging towards the end of this panel. We have Arisa, Associate Professor from University of Tokyo, a member of the UN High-Level Advisory Body in AI. So thank you for being with us today. And first of all, congratulations for being on the UN board. We are delighted to have one of our women for ethical AI representing the gender agenda there. And I'd like to turn it to you to really speak about the gender issue from a regional perspective. in Japan and how your government and your education system are actually engaging in this discussion to push the gender agenda forward.
Thank you very much. And I'm really honored to be in this panel session. And so, yeah, I am from Japan, and I think I am the only Asian from this panel. And when you hear about Japan, the images, what do you think about it? So yesterday, there's the person from the government actually maybe saying something about like a Hiroshima AI process. And within the G7 country, I think many of you may have some kind of images that Japan is somehow leading or collaborating with, you know, the European country or the US or the other world, like in ASEAN countries, and to kind of leading the discussion of AI ethics and governance. However, when we turn our eyes on like the gender equality or the gender issue, there's kind of like a striking the result that's saying that the gender gap in the World Economic Forum, so among like 146 countries, can you imagine where the Japan is ranked? 10? 20? 50? 100? The answer is 125th among the 146. That's the reality. So, you know, and it is really ironic to see that the Japanese AI governance principle, they has like the major principles of like the human-centric AI or like the sustainability and the gender and diversity within this principle. However, who wrote this? Only, you know, like 13% of the committee is the women. And this social principle has been released in the 2019. And at the same period, the European Trustworthy AI was also released. And I counted how many women are there. And 41% was women. And on the other side, Japan, only 30%. So I don't. So in this sense, I really highly appreciated what the RAM, the Readiness Assessment Methodology, is saying. That one of the items actually says that how many women are involved in the AI strategy, and I think with this kind of respect is really important. So even though you may think that Japan is leading this AI governance issue, but inside it, it's still, we have a really, difficulty about this gender issue. So in that way, I think with this kind of realm or the UNESCO or even this from this panel saying that we need the power of women to be included or involved in this AI policy, education, and all the other, the decision-making section. And I am really encouraged to be in part of this panel, and I'm really happy that I have a lot of colleagues in here. And in Japan, but we are also progressing. So one of the big good news is that we in Japan was also establishing the AI Safety Institute. And the director is a woman. Yay! Yeah, so we would love to involve them and to open up. And at that point, I would really love to continue this kind of discussion within panel.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Ali, for conducting this amazing panel. I think we got a lot of very concrete insights in terms of the criticism and the data and the information. Each one of you brought those areas, and very brave, Arisa, I love it. And then with also very concrete ways of advancing the issue. So, and thank you, Minister, for your presentation. I just want to conclude to say this is the group of women that are going to be helping UNESCO to walk the talk. So you can be confident that there's not going to be dropping any gender element in the reviews because you're there. As Arisa mentioned, every RAM has a chapter on how much women are engaged or not. I think that the Slovenian one will have a lot of very good news, but also it will have a woman at the top, so that's fantastic. But the other part is that what we conclude here is that you need to do it part of all of the endeavors. when we say ethics, as you said, Minister, you just told me, when you say ethics, when you say safety, when you say sustainable, when you say inclusive, when you say women too. It's not only about women, but it's about women too. So I want to tell you that as part of this panel, because these ladies, as I said, they have a task of your own. Emma is also part of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board. And each one of you are in the finance, in the parliamentarian, in the digital, but all of you have this commitment on advancing gender equality, and through gender equality, more sustainable and inclusive future for AI. We are going to release a statement. You will see it. I just want to tell you what are the kind of issues that under the leadership of Alessandra we got in the statement. Of course, all these women commit to ethical AI as defined by the recommendation. We are about inclusion, about sustainability. They call for all countries to join UNESCO's activities to support the call for AI and the Women for Ethical AI mission to drive systematic actions for gender inclusive AI and ex ante, as I said. Whenever a decision is taken, is wrong to say, oh, it was taken, and then we look at what was the impact on gender. Let's do it ex ante to make sure that these lenses are introduced. Very concrete, aligning the development of AI technologies to the human rights framework in order to safeguard human dignity and gender equality. Ensuring ex-ante assessment of new developments before being launched in the market on an ongoing ex-post assessment. This is Eleonora's point all the time, because things are changing so rapidly that ex-ante might not capture the developments. Ensuring the rule of law and liability mechanisms when harm is caused, including by sharing the code. And I agree with you, Emma. We always talk about, and I have to say, I'm sorry, I see all the wonderful men that join us in the room, but I cannot stand when people say violence against women as it falls from the sky. It's men violence against women, usually. And therefore, let's call the things as they are, because if not, it looks like, no, violence against women. No, let's call it as it is. And because we know that we are trapped in this situation in so many countries. Ensuring human determination on these developments by not providing legal personality to AI developments, changing the way we manage data. Data should belong to the data subjects and not to the companies that can collect information. Citizens have the right to know how their data is used and to call for full deletion of their own information from the cyberspace, and calling on governments to establish data trust. So all these things are the statement. You will see it out. Is one of the deliverables of the Women for Ethical AI. I have just to conclude with one thing. We are talking about the systemic issues and how we deal with including and making this revolution more inclusive. I have to say that we also need to look at the challenges that women face with the digital technologies, and the fact that they are always usually more stigmatized, more stereotyped, and more violence in the digital space. So I feel that we also owe it to women that are suffering also from this kind of violence, or men violence, or against women, also in the cyberspace. So one thing is to address the more systemic ethical. The other thing is not to allow that to happen. And if we talk about liability, I think that's a big liability in the cyberspace. So thank you so much. I will invite for a picture, but as I said, I know that there are many women in the public. I would love, and I see, I don't know what Daphne Feinholz went into the back, but she's one of the forces in the gender equality agenda. Eleonora, the president of the General Conference, Merve, Angelina, Minister, you are now joining the Women for Ethical AI. So please come with us. And Emma, so come to the picture, please.
Okay, this is great. This photo was actually not planned, but it will be probably one of the highlights of the forum. Okay, and now please smile.
Fantastic.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
This is yours. Somebody has told my.
So I think we're complete now because the other session in the other hall has also ended, and our last session, session 7, will be here. So we'll do change on the fly, like yesterday, and I kindly invite on stage the moderator of our last session, Dr. Achim Rosemann, a prominent researcher and teaching fellow from the Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence at the University of Cambridge. He will moderate the session on all hands on deck, shaping an inclusive future of AI.